Welcome to the YouTube Creators Hub podcast, where we help you conquer the internet one video at a time. We cover everything from how to start a YouTube channel to how to make a video go viral. And now, here's your host, the one and only Dusty Porter.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of the YouTube Creators Hub podcast, where each and every week I sit down with a content creator, specifically a YouTube content creator, and I talk with them about their journey on the platform. I ask them all sorts of questions about the different failures they've had, the strategies they've implemented, how they make money from their content. So if you're looking for a behind-the-scenes look of what it means and what it takes to be a content creator on YouTube in today's day and time, this is the show for you. We release these episodes every single Friday morning at 6 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, so you can subscribe to the show now wherever and however you listen to your podcast. It's absolutely free. You can always leave us a review. Let us know what you think of the show if that's something that you have time to do. And we're brought to you today by the fine folks over at TubeBuddy. Man, they have outdone themselves again. They have got so many new AI tools coming down the pipeline. They have really beefed up their A/B testing with thumbnails, titles, descriptions, all the metadata stuff, and they're just continually releasing new features that just blow me away. So if you're looking for a tool that can help you take your YouTube channel and YouTube game to the next level, TubeBuddy is the tool for you, and you can try them for 30 days for free by using our link down below. A couple of other things. We have the fastest and largest YouTube community right now on our Discord server, over 180 people strong. We also do monthly mastermind calls. All you have to do, support us over on Patreon. You can, again, support the show for just $5, get access to that community group, as well as the mastermind calls. We just had the one for March 2024 yesterday, and it was amazing. 11 people showed up. 2 more just sat around and listened. 13 total, and it was so good. So if you want to rub elbows with other creators, certainly check that out. And then I also offer professional YouTube coaching, business coaching, podcast help, and coaching. If that's something you want, all of that will be linked down below. And then something I'm going to tell you about later, I've just recently launched my newsletter. So if you're looking for kind of a more personal way to connect with me, it's a behind-the-scenes look of what I got going on. And I promise I'm not going to hold back. We're talking income reports, different things that I'm doing in my business. So if you're an entrepreneur, I think that newsletter is going to be for you, but you'll hear about that a little later. Guys, thank you so much for listening to this show. We continue to grow. So please, if you haven't already, the least you can do is just hit subscribe on your podcast player. That way you're notified every time we release an episode. And consistency is something I pride myself on. I batch record to make sure we always have episodes in the feed for you guys, and this week is no different. We got a great conversation for you. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into this week's conversation. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's conversation on the YouTube Creators Hub podcast. Dusty Porter, the host of the show here, as always, joined today by Justin Moore, who is a sponsorship coach and the founder over at Creator Wizard. You can find him on YouTube and all the socials, a school and community that teaches people how to find and negotiate your dream brand deals so that you stop leaving thousands of dollars on the table, which is something that I see all the time working with YouTube creators. Along with his wife, April, he has been a full-time creator for over 8 years and has personally made over $4 million working with brands. He also ran an influencer marketing agency for over 7 years that has helped other creators earn an additional $3 million. Justin, how you doing today?
What's up, Dusty? Glad to be back, man.
Yep, I am looking forward to it. As we're chatting, I'm going to look up exactly what episode. I had it in one of my Notion pages, but for some reason it's a reset and I can't find it. But we did have you on the podcast before, but you've been up to a ton since then. It's been a while. So give us an update on what's been going on with you and maybe one really fun or interesting story in regard to a creator or someone you work with, like an aha moment that kind of went through their mind.
Yeah, man, so much has happened since the last time we spoke. It's been this rocket ship that I really did not anticipate or expect, to be honest. I never really realized how much people need this information, something that always felt second nature to me throughout our career as YouTubers. We started our first YouTube channel in 2009, so we've been doing this a really long time. But when I started to talk to other people about how they were doing sponsorships, the brands that they were working with, it was really obvious to me that there's a big gap in terms of both the interest stress level in terms of people thinking, sponsorships is such a pain in the butt. I don't want to do them. I'll do them when I can, but I'd prefer other sources of revenue like AdSense or something. It's just easier. But when I sit them down and be like, no, it actually could be awesome, but you have to do it right. You can't mail it in essentially. Yeah, everything has really grown since then. So I guess the quick catch up is I have hundreds of creators in my alumni now who have gone through my Brand Deal Wizard program. My newsletter is up to almost 35,000 creators now. I don't even remember what it was at last time, but it was this kind of crazy growth trajectory. I have a new podcast called Creator Debates, where every episode pits two high-profile creators against each other to debate a hotly contested topic in the creator economy. Tagline: stupid arguments to help creators make smart decisions. So really fun doing that. I'm writing a book. I think that's probably the most exciting thing that's going on in my universe. It's called Sponsor Magnet, hoping to release that by the end of 2024. And I'm honestly pouring every single thing that I know about sponsorship strategy into this book. They're just really, I just haven't found anything out there that exists like that. And so I feel like I've arrived at the write a book chapter of the take over the world plan that I guess I've had. And that's the quick update. Yeah, I could share. I have so many stories. I've worked with tons of gigantic creators that you've definitely heard of, doing one-on-one coaching with them. Can't name them, obviously. I've worked down from people who are micro and nano creators who are getting sponsorships too. So it really runs the gamut.
That's awesome. Is there any that you can speak of? Maybe not mention their name, but just say a success story of maybe tell us their backstory briefly and explain how sponsorships change the game for them.
Yeah, I could actually share an anecdote from I recently did this thing called the 7-Day Pitch Challenge, Dusty, and it was super fun. This is something I've never done before. One thing I realized was that I have this assessment called the Sponsorship Wheel Snapshot, and it goes over my 8-step methodology about what I teach creators to land consistent deals. And it's basically it's about a 7 to 10 minute survey. You can take it, by the way, creatorwizard.com/snapshot. It's totally free. And basically what it does is you rate yourself in the 8 areas of my sponsorship wheel. So my 8 areas are pitch, negotiate, contract, concept, produce, feedback, publish, and analyze. And what I found is that once you take this survey, you get a cumulative score essentially on your ability. And what I always found was that everyone always rates themselves the lowest on pitch. They just don't feel confident about what to say when they reach out to a brand. They don't feel confident that they're reaching out to the right person. And so I thought, okay, man, if people are feeling or struggling, just getting past this very first step, like I should create something to help them with just this thing, not all those other things, because it's moot. If you can't feel comfortable pitching, then everything else is moot. And just quick clarification, Dusty, like a lot of people think that pitching a brand is when you reach out to them or like, hey, work with me. But when a brand reaches out to you, you still have to pitch them to convince them that you're the best person for the job, because they didn't just reach out to you. They reached out to 30 people probably, right? And so I created this thing called the 7-Day Pitch Challenge, and I had about 60 creators join it. It was a paid challenge, by the way. It was $97. And man, the outcomes, the results that people got from this pitch challenge was just absolutely nuts, dude. Like people were hearing back from brands the same day or the next day that they were reaching out to them. One creator in particular, his name was Christian Taylor. He has a channel called Trailer Made, kind of focus on tech and security type things on YouTube. And one thing that he was struggling with, he was talking about in the challenge, was the same old brands, like all this kind of similar brands are sponsoring those kind of tech focused, security focused creators. He was just like, I don't really know what other types of brands I could work with. It's like, I feel stuck. And so one of the things we talk about in the challenge is like how critical it is to do psychographic research on your audience to understand more texture about what problems do they have? What's keeping them up at night? What brands and products and services are they using and loving right now? Or maybe are they interested in? And basically it comes down to just like sending out a survey. And so what Christian did is he did a poll on his YouTube community tab, and he discovered that 70% of his audience is interested in home security as well. So not just like online security and privacy and things like that. It makes sense. If you're interested in that online, you probably want to keep your family safe in real life too. And so he was like, wow, this is fascinating. So he turned around and crafted a really compelling pitch to a residential alarm company, basically like a security company. And so I love this because it's a mini win. It's realizing it's not just like, oh, I got this brand deal for so much money. It's realizing, wow, I'm not just shackled by the brands that I think are the only types of folks that I can work with.
That's amazing. I love that. I love what you have going on over at Creator Wizard. It was episode 315 that you were on the podcast. It was in August of 2022, so almost 2 years ago here in a few months. And so there's been, since 2022 and 2024, there's been a lot go on in your personal life and your professional life. I think that sometimes sponsorships get looked at as like the ugly stepchild in kind of the YouTube workflow of things, because it can get ugly how you approach it. Do you do a cold email? Do you DM them on LinkedIn or Instagram? What would you say are the most common mistakes that creators make when it comes to sponsorships, whether it be during the pitch or during the negotiations or whatever it may be? I'd love to hear your perspective, being you've worked with so many large creators with this. What are the mistakes that folks make that kind of not help them, but discourage the people from working with them?
We could go a lot of different directions with this because there's a lot of mistakes. Let me do one that's actually maybe a little bit surprising, which is that inbound opportunities, meaning brands, when they reach out to you saying, hey, we would love to collaborate with you, everyone thinks that's the gold standard. They think, if I build it, they will come. If I just keep working on my YouTube channel, I keep growing, I get more views, brands will notice me. So finally, they'll notice me, right? And what I have found over the years, doing literally over 500 sponsorships personally for my wife and I's YouTube channels and social media over the years, but also getting hundreds of deals for other creators through the agency that I ran, is that it's actually outbound pitching and outbound prospecting that will ultimately lead to the most lucrative sponsorships for you. What happens when a brand reaches out to a creator with a campaign in hand? What I like to say is that campaign is basically fully baked. It's like they have already determined almost everything about the way that campaign is going to go down. They say, hey, it's a 90-second shout out integration on your YouTube channel. Can you do it or not? Here's the usage rights. Here's the exclusivity. Here's exactly what you have to say about the product. Take it or leave it, basically. Right? And when they're reaching out to you, basically already 95% of the legwork has already been done internally at the brand to say, this is what we want this to be about. And so that's, I think, some of the negative sentiment that creators feel about sponsorships comes from this. It's, oh man, brands, they're so rigid. They don't give me any creative freedom. They just want me to read this and it sounds like robotic and like an ad, and sponsorships gets a bad rap because of that, I think. And then it's this vicious cycle because they do the ad read because the brand says, and then the video does poorly, retention drops, and they're like, see, sponsorships suck. I told you. And I always sit people down and say, look, yeah, of course, if all you're doing is relying on inbound inquiries and all you're doing is just doing these deals and kind of the brand saying jump and you say how high, then of course that's going to be your experience with sponsorships. And so what I tell people is, look, imagine if you sat down and thought, okay, what actually would be a dream partnership for me and for my audience based on the type of videos and the content that I create? Let me actually go out there and craft a really compelling pitch that it's a clean slate. It's a blank slate where, yeah, this brand may not have an active campaign where they're like ready to hire me right away or a budget allocated ready for me right away. But I start this dialogue. And yeah, it's probably going to take longer to bring a deal to fruition, to get that deal over the finish line, but those deal sizes are going to be larger. You're going to be able to have your fingers creatively much earlier in the process to help shape the campaign that ultimately gets released. And people get very intimidated by this process because they've never really done it before. But again, in my experience, having done hundreds of deals, it's actually those outbound deals where you're able to not only generate more money, but you're able to generate much longer term partnerships with the brand, because it's not just about this like one-off transactional thing where talk about us for this Labor Day promotion. It's like, you become much more of like an ambassador.
To follow that up, exactly what you're saying is that I find that smaller to medium-sized creators, just from working with them and having some on the podcast, where they often stumble is that they're eating up anything that comes their way. They're just gobbling up, oh, I got an email from this company. I don't know what the product is. I don't know what the service is, but I'm going to jump on that thing. They're paying me, because it goes back to the initial motive of wanting to be a creator. In that, it's what a lot of what I preach here on the podcast is, if your motive is monetization, then you're really in the wrong business, right? Because you're never going to succeed, because your motive or driver, now there will be some outliers, but for the most part, you're not going to succeed. And it's interesting to hear you say about have some back and forth. These pre-made, I'm dealing with one right now where a company came at me, and I'll get a little behind the curtains here on the podcast, but they came to me and said, hey, we want you to produce 2 videos, one to be on your YouTube channel and one to be an ad for the product. It's a software as a service, right? And I told them my price. I actually emailed a good friend of mine, a friend of yours, I think Nick Nimmin, and he and I were going back and forth on some things, and I'm not going to divulge any private things that he told me, but basically he said, I'm not going to turn my camera on unless it's X amount of dollars. And I think that he can say that and do that because of how large of a creator and how confident he is. But these smaller creators lack so much confidence that they're willing to jump at anything. What's your feedback? What would you say about that in regards to people just willing to take anything and just throwing away all the trust they've earned with their audience?
It's funny, Dusty, because I literally just posted a short form video about this very topic, because I actually have a theory as to why this happens a lot. And I think it comes down to validation. When you have been trying your hardest to become a YouTuber and trying to become a creator, oftentimes you have a lot of noise in your ears from your friends and your family and your acquaintances who are saying like, are you still doing that internet thing? When are you going to get a real job? When are you going to take your life more seriously? Like, when are you going to do this thing, right? And then a brand comes inbound to this creator and is like, hey, we're going to pay you to talk. We're going to compensate you to like talk about us. It feels like a flex. It's like you feel like you could turn to all these naysayers in your life and be like, see, you all said this wasn't going to work. And now I've got this certified brand right in my inbox who's going to pay me. Now what? And so I think that's one reason. And I have empathy for creators like that. I don't get mad at creators like that. I think you have to get a few deals under your belt sometimes to really realize, hey, actually, I think I'm maybe getting the short end of the stick here. That was a lot of work for $50 and a bag of potato chips or something. I think I need to maybe be compensated more appropriately. So that's one reason. The other reason too, I think, is that we have absolutely no reference point as a smaller creator. Maybe you don't have any friends or peers in the industry. You were able to email Nick, but a lot of people maybe don't have any friends, don't know anyone in their real life who's really doing this. And so $50, sure, yeah, that sounds reasonable. Why not? I call this, when I talk about in my program, this is called competitive pricing, where you email your peers and you're just like, hey, how much do you charge? And the dangerous part of that is that how do you know whether your friend has any idea? Maybe your friend asked someone who had no idea. It's like garbage in, garbage out. Right. There's other pricing styles, obviously, but like this is the first one that many people use because it just seems like, I guess I'll either Google, watch some YouTube videos, watch some TikToks or something. And maybe if, in fact, one of my longest coaching clients, his name is Paul. He has a podcast called the Green Industry Podcast. The anecdote that he shared was like when he started doing sponsorships, he asked a friend also, and his friend was like, oh, I charge this. And then Paul was like, well, my audience is 95% smaller than his. Like I literally 5% of that. So I'm just going to charge 5% of what he was charging. Right. And it was just like, we would come up with these like perverse formulas that make no sense, but that's just the way it is until you learn.
Hey guys, a quick pause in the interview this week to talk about my new weekly newsletter called the Entrepreneur's Minute. My plan for the newsletter is to only send out one email every week with a recap of what's going on in my business, maybe do an income report letting you know how much money I've made that week or that specific month, an update on my YouTube channel, and just a behind-the-scenes look of what it takes to be a creator, the books that I'm reading, the products I'm discovering, new AI tools and resources. So if you're just looking for a way to better connect with me, Dusty, and see what I got going on, and the different things that I want to write about each week, maybe it's my family, maybe it's my business, it's absolutely free. It's called the Entrepreneur's Minute, and I would really appreciate it. All right, now back to the show.
Yeah, I just found with me personally, I can't speak with anyone else. It's oftentimes lack of confidence, of the imposter syndrome of why can I remember when I started coaching about a couple of years ago, and literally the first 8 or 9 clients that I had, we were getting off the call, and over 5 or 6 of them said to me, hey, listen, I just want to let you know, I appreciate your pricing, but this needs to be, I had one tell me last week that it still needed to be like double or triple what I was charging. And it's that imposter syndrome of knowing that you're good enough, that your stuff will play. In the analogy of sports, right? I love sports and analogies of that. It's like, hey, your stuff will play. Now, do you mind if we take a slight sidetrack and discuss newsletters real quickly? Because
heck yeah, let's do it.
you have a really successful one, over 35,000. I mean, you don't even know. It's just so many. You're now to that point. You don't even know how many, right? It's so big.
I literally, dude, this is how bad it is. It's like, not bad. It's just like, I literally just deleted, I purged 4,000 or 5,000 people off of my newsletter. Like,
Sure.
like in the beginning, I would have been like, oh my God, we're getting 5,000 people. It's crazy. But yeah, now it's crazy, dude. But you got to get those cold subs out of there if they don't want to be there.
You do. I was listening to the Tim Ferriss podcast on my walk today, and he was promoting his 5 Bullet Friday, which I'm very hesitant to ever subscribe to newsletters, and I'm currently working on the back end of getting mine up and running right now. And I know how hard to do it right it is, but he just casually said on there, he said, this is the biggest newsletter in the world. He said, I think we have like a few million subscribers or something. And I was like, good grief. I can only imagine the money he's making from the ads and the things that he's putting in that newsletter. But that's a side note. When you think of newsletters in relation to YouTubers and just content creators, it is one of my biggest failures as a business person, as someone who runs a business, that I don't have one up yet. I believe that with my audience on the podcast, I now have over 14 million downloads on the podcast, which in podcasting terms is in the upper 2 to 3%. I know for a fact that I could have had an email list, maybe not as big as yours, but certainly to a point to where I could have that as another monetization method for me. So can you talk about newsletters in relation to content creators, and when you talk to them behind the doors, do you say, hey, listen, you need to have a newsletter?
Yeah, 100%. In fact, I was on a coaching call yesterday or the day before speaking with a very large creator who had an email list in the 6 figures of people on the newsletter and has not sent a single thing to them.
Holy cow.
And I think a lot of people think, a lot of YouTubers think that the purpose of an email list is if you want to sell something directly to them. It's like, hey, one day I'm going to create products, or one day I'm going to share my latest YouTube video or something. That's what they think. They think the only thing I could share, what am I going to tell them? Oh, my latest YouTube video is out. Like, yeah, that's it, right? And it's not worth my time. I'm just like, I'm a YouTuber. I want to focus on making great videos, right? And when I sit people down, I say something very simple about the idea of having a newsletter. Let's first talk about the importance of it. Obviously, the number one most important reason is to have a direct connection with your audience, so that if your YouTube channel ever gets hacked, or you ever get demonetized, or for whatever reason, you're no longer able to have access to your YouTube channel, which may be your primary revenue stream, you're able to have a direct connection with your audience to email them and be like, hey, this happened. I'm really bummed. I'm going to move over here, or I'm going to be on this other platform over here. You can still follow me. So that's the most important reason, of course. But the other important reason is that the most important thing you should be thinking about as a creator is like, how can I serve my audience? How can I serve my viewers? And I would almost guarantee you that your audience could be very capably served by you in other content formats, not just video. Maybe there is going to be other supplemental interesting information that they could consume in a written form. So maybe you use HARPA or something like AI or ChatGPT or something to take the transcript of your YouTube video and repackage it into a newsletter that you send out once a week. And then, yeah, of course you can include the YouTube video on there, but it's like people have different learning styles. They have different consumption styles. Obviously it depends on what the type of format is the type of content that you create. If it's like entertainment based, of course. A big part of what I do is help people understand, like, you're not cannibalizing your YouTube channel by serving your audience in these other content formats. When it comes to what could I even say to them on a newsletter, it's updates on your life. It's maybe supplemental information that don't make sense to include in a YouTube video. And so at the core, it's service. How can I serve them? But then on the back end of it, from a monetization perspective, there's so many other ways in which you could make money with a newsletter that have nothing to do with you selling your own products. For example, my newsletter, which I started primarily to serve other creators, sponsorships on the newsletter is now a $20,000 to $25,000 a month revenue stream for me. Mm-hmm. And that was not a revenue stream I had a year ago.
Can I ask you this? Is it affiliate from people clicking, or is it a combination of affiliate and sponsorships? And the new thing that I've found people doing is advertising other people's newsletters on their newsletter. So do you break down that amount?
Yeah. The 20 to 25,000 is pure flat sponsorships. That doesn't even include affiliate. That doesn't even include affiliate revenue. Affiliate revenue is more than that. And then I have not for a while. I was doing newsletter referral, like paid recommendation type things. And I also was paying other people to recommend my newsletter. So I was doing it both ways essentially. And so, yeah, there's so many different ways in which you can find other newsletters that are catering to a similar kind of audience persona as you, it can be very lucrative to strike some of those deals. And yeah, man, like and that's just the newsletter. Remember, I have the YouTube, I have the podcast, I have the social media, I have myself, Dusty. I am an asset as well.
That's right.
If a brand wants to come and say, hey, will you do a webinar for our customers, creator economy company X? That costs money. That costs money for something like that. And one of the things I like to stretch people's brains around when it comes to sponsorship is the brand deal with sponsorship is not just like when brand X gives me their products and I talk about them on my YouTube channel in an integration. There's so many other ways in which you can serve a brand that have nothing to do with your YouTube channel.
Yeah, I think that's so interesting that you say that about the newsletter, because I consider it to be like the one that I'm working on right now that I hope to launch in the next week or so. I want to use it as another trust building tool. And what I mean by that, and that creators listening to this, I want you to understand this clearly, that your YouTube channel is a branch on your tree, right? Justin just mentioned many branches on his tree, the YouTube channel, the newsletter, the podcast, the creator academy, whatever it may be. You just need to have your different branches, and they all need to come back to your core kind of principles of what you are as a business. But I use my podcast as a trust building mechanism. I was listening to the Tim Ferriss podcast this morning on my walk, and I remember someone early on in my podcast said, the first minute of this guy's podcast is just him shilling or him talking about his sponsor. But literally, I bookmarked it today on my phone. His podcast this morning, the first 9 minutes was just maybe not 9, it might have been 7 or 8, but it was an obscene amount of time. So people will listen, and sponsors are paying because they're getting ROI on that. So I would use the newsletter, and am going to use the newsletter to share with creators the guests I've had on the podcast, the links that they've shared, and some things that I have going on in my business, and use that in tandem with the YouTube channel and the podcast and my speaking and all the things that we do as creators using ourselves as brands. I love to hear you say that.
Can I also provide maybe a mindset shift around the idea of selling your own stuff or talking about sponsors or anything like that? One other really common objection that I hear from YouTubers is, okay, I don't want to talk about sponsors. Maybe they do sell stuff. Maybe they have a course, maybe they have other products, or maybe they're like, I don't want to talk about anyone else other than my own stuff. Why would I talk about a sponsor when I could talk about my own thing? I'll make more money, this type of idea. And I have this principle that I call audience first offers, which means that everything that you do has to be about your audience. It's not about you. And this psychographic research exercise that we were talking about a little bit earlier, a lot of the questions that you should be answering, that you should be asking in these surveys, it's not just about brands, products, things like this. It's also, hey, what services or products do you wish that I offered that I don't? You should be asking, what peers or other creators in our industry would you love to see me collaborate with, and why? And so again, that kind of what's keeping you up at night thing. And so once you get this data back, you'll think, okay, yeah, there's a lot that I could serve my audience with my own courses, digital products, books, speaking, whatever, SaaS program, whatever. Yeah, there's things that I'm going to sell directly to them. Great. But you know what? There's a lot of things that I'm not going to create. I'm not going to create a CRM for that, or I'm not going to create this brand's products over here, or this type of thing. But you know what? My products, my audience says that they have that problem. So I should go out there and try to find sponsors to help my audience solve that problem. So I call it my PSA. You've got products, you've got sponsors, and then the final one is alliances. You probably have friends who are really good at coaching for this particular thing, or maybe they're a bookkeeper, maybe they're something. They have some sort of service for your audience have this big problem with this thing, and you better be putting their offer in front of your audience, because if you have this scarcity mindset about, like, man, they buy this person's course or they buy this person's product, they're not going to have any money to buy mine thing. That is a scarcity mindset view. That when you were mentioning about trust building, what do you think they're going to do when their life improves because of that? The friend that you introduced them to, they're going to trust you more. They're going to be like, Dusty's the one who introduced me to this person or this brand or this product or whatever. And now they're going to be more interested in potentially purchasing your thing. So the lead that I'm bearing here is that you'll actually make more money if you approach things this way.
It's one of the reasons why I love podcasting so much. You obviously have your podcast now. I'm not sure when you started it, but I don't think you had the podcast when we spoke
I didn't.
last. And maybe, hopefully, it was something that we talked about during the episode, might have spurred your interest in it. But either way, podcasting is such a fun way to build that trust, because these people are in your ear, you're in your audience's ear. It sounds disgusting, but you're literally with them as they walk, like I was this morning, or doing household chores, or like when I had smaller children. I can't do this now, but when I had babies, if I would had to get up at night, or my wife would get up and I got up as well, then I'd be listening to a podcast or whatever it is. So I love podcasting as a tool in tandem with newsletters and YouTube channels and websites and all the things that we've talked about. So I want to talk about small creators and sponsorships. So people think that there's a threshold you have to reach. You got to have 1 million subscribers, which, by the way, subscribers is a vanity number. No, that's really not even a number people care about anymore. People use that button like a like button now, the way the home feed is presented to you. With that being the case, is there a number? I think we talked about this last time you were on the podcast. I was listening to it a couple of days ago. But is there a number, or is there a threshold, or would you say to that small creator listening to this episode right now, hey, go ahead and get your ducks in a row to get the back end stuff ready, because you're ready to, you can do this now?
One of the most interesting things about having a niche, Dusty, is that I have been attacking the topic of sponsorships repeatedly every single day for 3 years. Every single angle, I'm thinking about it, I'm talking about it, all this stuff too. And so since we had our first conversation, I've actually thought really deeply about this particular idea, because what I've found is that a lot of creators think that there is an arbitrary number, 10,000 subscribers or something, because one time one brand told them that. And they're like, oh, I guess I have to get 10,000 subscribers or something, or whatever number it is, doesn't matter. And the idea that I like to talk about is something called the sponsorship continuum. And what this means is that when you are first starting out as a YouTuber, if you are only getting, quote unquote, only hundreds of views on average for your YouTube videos, if you were to reach out to a brand and be like, hey, pay me to talk about you on my YouTube channel, that's probably not going to move the needle for them, right? And so what you should be pitching instead is you say, hey, look, I did an audit of your social presence, brand. And I think there is a way in which we could be telling your brand story across your social media channels in a more compelling way. I can actually create some content for you on autopilot. I deliver 2 to 3 videos. You put it up on your YouTube channel. You put it up on your website. You put it up on your social media pages. Maybe you can run paid advertising with this. And oh, by the way, go take a look at my YouTube channel, because it's my portfolio. So what you pitch has to change based on where you're at in your journey. So in the beginning, it's probably not going to be about you posting it on your channel. So now let's say you grow, you move along the continuum. Okay. Now you're getting thousands of views on average on your YouTube videos. Maybe it's a combination. Maybe it's a combo of doing some consulting for them, creating some content for the brand. And then, maybe posting about it on your page and your channel can now be part of the deal, because it starts becoming more meaningful. Now you're growing. You're really achieving some scale now. You're getting tens of thousands of views per video now. Then maybe the thrust of your pitch is entirely, hey, I'm going to do an integration on my YouTube channel. That's it, because it's going to really move the needle for you. And so I like giving this permission. Figure out where you are, or orient yourself along where you're at on the continuum, because the permission that I'm going to give you is that it doesn't matter at all how many subscribers you have. It doesn't matter at all how many views you're getting on your YouTube videos, because you can serve brands, but it's going to change. The thrust of your pitch is going to change.
Yeah, and even as a small creator, it doesn't have to be you doing it on their socials. Maybe if it's a product, maybe you say, hey, you don't pay me, but you send me the product. Whatever it may be, you find the way to get the doors open, and you do it in a professional way, and you handle yourself the way that professionals handle themselves. And I think that when it comes to not just content creation, but entrepreneurship and growing a business and growing a brand, that if you are consistently doing the work and you're consistently showing up, you're doing more than 95% of people, because most people are going to drop off. Most people are going to fall off. Most people are going to start that newsletter, and then a month later, they're going to cancel that paid membership of that newsletter service because they didn't see anybody come through. Most people are going to stop doing that podcast because they got 4 months into it and they think the only people listening is still their mom and their grandma. But what they don't realize is at month 9, they're going to get the break. They're going to have that guest that takes them to the next level. I think as creators, sometimes we put ourselves in a box and we have a timetable at when we think we have to do things, and we have to follow the same levels and steps that other creators have.
Well, you know what, Dusty? This reminds me of when my wife, April, and I started our YouTube channel back in 2009. Like, they were just starting the partner program, literally just starting it. My wife got rejected from the partner program 3 times before she got into it. And so literally for the first couple years, we were not making money at all. There was no brands paying YouTubers at the time. Like, this was early days, right? And so I look back at us OG creators, so to speak, as it was a different time, because like the purpose or the reason that a lot of us got into making YouTube videos was not to make a ton of money. And to some degree that's changed now. And I'm not like looking down on anyone who like gets into it for the money, of course. But what I am saying is that if you aren't able to stretch the time horizon out of what success looks like and when the return on the investment needs to come for you, like, you're going to be in for a world of hurt, right? Because the other example I can give is that with the newsletter in particular, I was paying someone before you could ever even pay me, Dusty. I didn't have coaching. I didn't have courses. I didn't have anything. I hired someone to help me curate the newsletter. I was sending paid sponsorship opportunities to creators every single week for free. That's what the thrust of my newsletter is. By the way, it's creatorwizard.com/join, shameless plug. I was paying someone to, hey, help me do this because it was taking so much time. And so if I didn't have a long-term vision behind, I am going to monetize this down the line. I know I'm going to create a course. I know I'm going to have coaching. I know I'm going to do these things, but right now I'm in audience building mode. And so I'm okay seeing this money go out because I know what's going to come down the line.
Oh, man, so much good stuff. I know I try to keep my show to around 30 or 35 minutes, but there's so many more things that I want to talk about with you. So maybe we'll have you on again next year for another follow-up. I do want to ask you that people like you, you're not going to rest on your laurels. You've got things you're planning. What's next for you? What would you say would be your short-term, long-term goals for Creator Wizard and beyond?
So I have my North Star is I have a mission to help creators big and small land 1 million sponsorships by 2032. And right now I'm in the thick of trying to figure out how to track that. I've helped a lot of people right now, but something about this goal really fires me up. And so it's just like helping more people, obviously writing the book, getting that published, and then a conference. I'm gonna be launching the Sponsorship Strategy Summit in 2025. And I'm really excited about that one in particular because I get really fired up when I'm around other people who love talking about this nerdy topic around sponsorships that I do. And there's nothing really that exists out there like this. Some creator conferences like Vid Summit and stuff have panels and stuff around brand partnerships, but there's no conference devoted to this. And if you look at any study out there around YouTube revenue streams and stuff, like, brand partnerships are literally the #1 bucket for most people, right? Beyond AdSense, of course. And so I think it only makes sense to have a conference devoted to this. And yeah, I'm planning this out right now to make this happen.
My wife, who is probably as far from the creator space as you can be, and she is a teacher. I love her to death, but she's not very knowledgeable about what goes on here in this realm, which is fine. I don't act like I know what goes on inside those 4 school walls. God forbid, that would be awful, right? So with that being the case, she now knows what an influencer is. That just shows you 5 years ago, she didn't. Now she consumes these Facebook reels and these TikToks of people organizing and teachers that are doing it. And she's seeing these stories of teachers and principals quitting these jobs, making $45,000 a year, which, by the way, they're severely underpaid. For the teachers listening, they're making hundreds of thousands of dollars. In particular, a principal that she follows now is an entertainer and he's a comedian, but he's also an influencer. And she's like, I want to do that. I'm like, there's a little more to it. There's a lot to it, but that's just where we are. And so my final question to you, Justin, is this: 2024 to 2032, which is when you have your goal set, which is 8 years, give or take a few months. What do you think this next era of YouTube is going to be? What are going to be the important things? What are going to be the things that creators need to focus on going forward?
With the rise of AI, I think there's a lot of uncertainty around like what YouTube is going to look like. And I don't have the answers. I'm not a futurist, but what I can say is that I truly believe that your unique voice of what is your unique angle and the way in which you look at the world, that is going to be highly prized in the next 8 years, the next 15 years. And so if what you are creating is somewhat commoditized, meaning that, not to like all of a sudden throw a curveball in here, but if you're a faceless channel, if you don't have any personality or anything in your content, I would be very concerned, because I think with the barrier to entry, I think is going to be lowered to the basement for anyone to create really compelling content potentially, I would be very concerned. And even when it comes to brand partnerships, like, brands want to partner with people, not necessarily channels. And so I would really seriously think about, what does your strategy look like to actually to inject your personality into your videos?
Man, that is so good, because I agree 100% in that if you do something in the next few years that, like you said, the faceless channels, or it was why early on 10 years ago when I started my tutorial YouTube channel, and I realized that my why was to answer people's questions about technology and to help them get from point A to point B. And I'm not saying this to toot my own horn, but now there are channels of young people basically copying my model, and they've done what I've basically started 12 years ago, and they're doing it at scale. They're doing it way beyond what I'm able to do now. But I want to encourage people that, yes, the barrier to entry is going to go to the basement. You're exactly right. But budget is going to be lower than ever. The time it takes you to create things at maybe not super good level, but really good, is going to be extremely low. But what I will encourage the creators listening to this now, and I think you would agree with this, is that you got to lean in. You need to lean into these tools. You need to lean into these things, because if you are the person who knows how to use it, if you do have that newsletter, if you do have that branding around yourself, and you have fun personalities and people love you and trust you, you're gonna succeed well beyond where the tools and the machines can take us. I believe that with all my heart.
100%. Totally agree with that.
Justin, you have been awesome. I know you got a ball game to get to, so we're going to wrap this thing up. But if you would, let the folks know where they can get in touch with you, maybe the easiest way. I'll put all of your links. I'll put the newsletter link. I'll put the YouTube channel. Everything will be in the show notes. All the things that we've discussed today will be in the show notes. But let folks know the easiest way to get in touch with you.
This is meta, because we were talking about newsletters today. And if I could give anyone a recommendation, if you're at the end of a podcast and the podcast host asks, hey, where should people find you? Only say your newsletter, creatorwizard.com/join. Because if you want to find any of my other stuff, my YouTube channel, my socials, you'll find it. You'll go down the rabbit hole, but creatorwizard.com/join is the way.
I can tell you that's the first thing I'm going to do when we hang up is subscribe to your newsletter, because being that I'm in the midst of it, and people may think, oh, all you got to do is go to a newsletter service. And no, there's way more than I'm not doing it base level. I want to do this thing right. So I have some planned posts that I'm going to do, how I want to do it. I've got some, make sure my links are all in line. I make sure that the way that I shared on the podcast and my channel are properly done, that I'm using the right service. There's a lot involved, but I'm going to take notes on what Justin has done and take a look at his and see if I can implement some of his strategies. So Justin, thanks again, my friend.
Heck yeah. Thanks for having me, man. I appreciate it.
You've been listening to the YouTube Creators Podcast. We want to thank you and invite you to subscribe to the show, as well as support us on Patreon for great perks, such as having your YouTube channel featured on the show and a link on our website. Until next time, keep uploading those videos.